I You're talking to somebody that pretty much despises AI and that has actively gone out of their way to block pages that use it.
Welcome to the castle, and welcome to a CastleMania production.
CastleMania?
Welcome back to the castle. Today we have a guest with us to go over some modern gaming topics, and that is Candy from Candy's Classic Game Shrine. And you may know her from conventions as Virtual Girl. Candy?
Well, thank you for having me on here. This is a nice little treat. It's been a long time since I've done a little discussion like this. I look forward to covering the topics today because I've been talking about them a lot and I don't think it's enough.
This is really a pickup of a conversation we had in person just a few weeks ago. So I was on the East Coast to go to Toy Fair and, of course, connected with Candy to just hang out, play with the dogs, go shoot some pool. And so what this is kind of an extension of that conversation, but to kind of introduce the topic, which is sort of the homogenization of gaming, modern gaming, what we're gaining, what we're losing, and how we all feel about it. I think a good kind of kickoff would be to mention what's coming. So this is coming out of GDC. We've had news that on the good news front, the Xbox will have a disk drive, which means backwards compatibility isn't limited to just digital purchases. It will presumably support physical media. And, I was excited about that. I think a lot of us were. But then the wet blanket kind of got thrown on that topic when they're like, and we're going to introduce, I feel like, force AI into gameplay, the co-pilot. So I mean, when you heard that, what were your initial thoughts? Because I certainly had some.
I You're talking to somebody that pretty much despises AI and that has actively gone out of their way to block pages that use it and things like that. Like, it has uses, but most people are running wild with it in ways that they really shouldn't be. And like, I feel like this is one of them. It's cool to have, like, for instance, Nintendo would give you, like, I think it was the flower, or not the flower, it would be like a star or um a leaf where you'd be like an invincible Mario for the stage. Like,
Sure.
that's okay. This seems like an overstep.
I think my concern was that a lot of the loot box mechanics and the monetization mechanics were they didn't feel organic, and the further it went along, it felt like they started the project for a game with the concept of we're going to have microtransactions, and then they shape the gameplay around that.
Pay to win mechanics, essentially.
Yeah, when you're talking about AI, there are applications for it, and then there is a kind of forced, shoehorning in of it. And if you're starting the game, like, okay, we're kicking off this new game build, it has to use Copilot. You're shaping the gameplay around a mechanic that shouldn't, maybe be there, or it certainly shouldn't shape the story as a must-have.
Yeah.
The announcement, I feel like they expected like great applause, and they thought this was going to be like the spiking of the football in the end zone, right? And maybe some people feel that way. They're like, yeah, this is great. I don't know anyone that feels that way. But I did talk to one of the people in my band is on the Xbox team. And I asked him at band practice yesterday, I said, hey, have you been following GDC? And he said, no, not much. Like, what's your takeaway? And I shared kind of like what we already said, that it was good that they have a disk drive and this and that, but that I felt like it just kind of got ruined when they closed with this announcement. And he pivoted immediately into accessibility, which of course, if and Microsoft, to their credit, has done a great job.
Yeah, that controller they have, that accessibility controller is fantastic. I love that idea. I love the idea of making games accessible for everybody. 100%.
Yeah, and that's great. Any effort to make gaming accessible is, of course, great. Nobody's going to complain about that. But are we solving a problem that's already been solved? Are we doing a more effective solving of that? I don't know. I mean, I know when you turn on a new game, you can choose your difficulty settings, and this kind of might fall more appropriately on the developers than the platform.
Hmm.
But I am not going to complain about the platform extending that. I just also wouldn't highlight it as the killer app.
Yeah, I think you would need to see it in action before you can say one way or another because, I mean, for instance, AI can be one of the greatest tools or it can be one of the worst ones. Like, for instance, real quick in gaming, like, I think AI could potentially be useful in a game like, for instance, Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
There's so many dialogues that you can potentially have with characters if you just have AI generate it randomly. You're not necessarily stealing anything, but it helps you get more out of the game, feel like it's new, something that's alive, but the AI isn't also stealing from people per se.
Yeah. So it's adding like a dynamic to a game. Because you could have scripted conversations, like when Link walks into a village, you're going to get the same response from that villager every time.
Exactly.
But if you have AI doing it, then there's potentially more dynamic conversations happening. That's actually the first really good example of a potential use case I've heard for AI. The kind of cringe examples that I heard initially and before the accessibility argument were more around like, hey, if you're struggling with a game and you're spending, your afternoon trying to complete a level, at some point the game might offer to just play it for you and get you on to the next part. And to me, if that's needed, that's where to me it falls in the developer's decision to make and not the platforms.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, because they're the ones that created the story, and they're the ones that created that gameplay. Having
And the difficulty arc.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of it. There are times where yeah, it is a little frustrating, but you work your way through it. And again, setting aside like an accessibility event, to me the reward is robbed from you if you just learn to lean on that crutch. Uh,
Yep. I think if anything, maybe a happy medium would be the AI would teach you kind of like a tutorial in a game how to get through that specific level. It's like here, instead of running, don't run, jump here and duck, you know. That would be a little bit better.
that could be a little bit better, and you actually just made me think of a kind of a funny example. I completed Super Metroid for the first time maybe 2 years ago. It was 3 years ago now. And this is just funny, embarrassing funny. There's a part in the first third of the game where you have to run like a full sprint. And I thought I was doing it, but I didn't realize that you could run even faster. And I just couldn't get past this part. And I started exploring the world, looking for a power up that maybe I didn't have or whatever. And then it occurred to me, a friend of mine, her name's Vanessa Vanessaria. She's a contributor on Retro RGB.
Hmm.
She's a big Metroid fan. And so I reached out to her on Discord and I'm like, I'm stuck. And she's like, I got you. And we worked through it together. And there was a couple points in that game. I did fall down a pit where you have to wall jump out, or you have to, no, you have to do
Rocket jump? No, not rocket jump.
yeah, it's like a spark jump or something like that to get out. And she helped me with that. And it was just so fun to kind of reach out to a friend and to have a virtual couch co-op, like try this, And what a great game. If somehow you're watching this and you haven't played Super Metroid, play it. That is one when we're talking about story arc and something you just grabbing you and getting you in the feels, like that game will do it. And I just you know, hadn't played it until a couple of years ago. So, but that's actually an interesting point. So, what is it about gaming that we are seeking, maybe from our past, like retro gaming experiences growing up, that's kind of missing? Is it the memories like I just described, like having that moment where you something just really resonated with you? Uh, this is potentially bad example because I was going to suggest, like, and maybe the game was just okay, but it was made that much more, better because it's just a memory you have. Is that recreatable? Was there something different about gaming before that we're missing now?
I think there was. Like, at its core, gaming, it's still a big corporate thing. People are going to want to make their investors happy, but I think greed has gotten a hold a little too much of a lot of these gaming companies, and it's focused more on making money and not being creative and trying to do something new and different from your competitors. It's like, oh no, this person or this company has this processor. Well, I'm going to make sure I have this processor too. And it's like,
Right.
yay. It's like I kind of miss the bit wars.
Yeah.
Like,
And not necessarily just in processing power. Nintendo's proved that multiple times that you don't have to have the best processor, but you have to have engaging gameplay dynamics and
yep.
story. But and this is kind of what I was talking about, and I think this was the question I asked you when we were shooting pool in New Jersey. I said, what is the point of a next generation console, really? Like, what are we actually looking for that we can't get now? Because I'm starting to view consoles as just the way we're going as just launchers. I don't think that Xbox is going to change their controller much, right?
Nope.
And so if it's basically the same controller, and you're gonna get hammered with open world games and this and that, and it's just, are we chasing hair follicles? You know, being represented in games, is that really it or not? And kind of what's the point? And then by extension, like,
Yeah.
why, if everything's an Xbox, and people will make the argument to have PlayStation games on Xbox, what's the point of owning one console over the other?
Yeah, there really isn't a point, at least right now, there really isn't a point in owning all three. I wound up giving my brother-in-law my PS5 because I don't play it. There's nothing, I don't even touch my Xbox. Like, there's no point. There's nothing on either one that I'm like, oh, I need this. And it's like, it's just, here's another Battle Royale. Here's another open world game. Here's another microtransaction fest. It's like, whoopee.
Yeah. Yeah. We're fatigued of that. Fortnite, love it or hate it, was a novel, experience at the time, and it was exciting. It kind of gamified, like, Hunger Games essentially. And it was fun and it was exciting, but then everyone needed their own version of that. Breath of the Wild was mind-blowing, but then everyone needed their own version of that. And it seems like, yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think the problem, and I actually brought this up to that same friend the other day, that was just that the companies are telling us what we want, but they're not
Yes.
listening to us when we're telling them what we want.
Yes.
And so I feel like they need somebody that's like a little bit more on the ground level, or is their world that they live in guiding some of the critical business decisions? And in the example, to me, counterpoint was made that Nintendo is not run, that the CEO is not a gamer, and why should Microsoft have a CEO
Yeah.
that's a gamer? And I'm not necessarily saying the CEO has to be a gamer, but Nintendo has Miyamoto, who has been at the driver's seat since day
And
one.
when they had Iwata, when Iwata was in charge of Nintendo, you can tell he was a gamer, and it made a difference in Nintendo when they had a actual gamer in charge.
And so these things make a difference. As I've been kind of putting these ideas out there and having kind of community around this, which is awesome. Most people have been super kind of just thoughtful and kind of like, yes, let's talk about this instead of just negative or defensive, because there are certainly people out there that are defensive of the direction we're going, and that's fine. If there's something I'm missing, and it might mean that, like, where we're headed is just not meant for us.
That's the thing, I fully, appreciate the fact that I'm getting gray hairs. I'm getting old. Like,
Mhm.
the young whippersnappers, it's their turn to be in charge and dictate things. But I do feel like for the last several generations, like the investors have been conditioning us to care less about the quality of the games and more just about the computing power, and just making us more into these camps of like, oh yeah, no, this has this processing power and it has this chip, and it's like, but does it play good games? Does it have good games? Like, yes, I can drop $800 on like this console, but to collect dust, to be a
Yeah.
paperweight.
And first party games should definitely offer something. In my opinion, there should be a reason to buy a console. When you tell me everything's an Xbox, what I'm hearing is I'll just buy a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation 6 rather than get your Xbox games there, because I at least expect Sony to hold some of their games to their ecosystem. And not
Yeah,
only that,
yeah,
but
no, they're stingy.
yeah, and but those games should be best played on PlayStation.
Hmm.
Third party games should be playable on
On
whatever.
anything.
And we have a universal controller. We have the Xbox style controller, we have the Switch Pro controller, and then we have the PS5 DualSense. Those can accommodate any third party game
Pretty much, yeah.
that's meant to be on multi-platform. But I like it when companies go the extra mile, particularly for first party games. But the example I was going to share was Resident Evil Requiem. So I've started playing through that. And up until recently, I've been buying everything on Xbox if it's available on Xbox, because
Hmm.
I thought I preferred the controller to the DualSense. But I've started buying more on PlayStation just because more often than not, when I check Does It Play, doesitplay.org, it will show that most games are playable without a download or without online requirements on Sony. If that's
Yeah.
the case at all, it's typically a PlayStation release and not a Microsoft release. In this specific case with Resident Evil, you can actually play both offline and both without downloading off of disc, which is great.
That is awesome.
I was playing the game, and this is one of those games where it's creepy, right? I play this at night when it's dark, and I'm the only one in the room, and I started hearing the raindrops bouncing off the pavement from the DualSense controller.
That's awesome.
And that's what I'm talking about. Or when you're walking through some of the areas and you can hear the floorboards creaking, but it sounds like it's under you because it's coming from your controller, and somehow they have a spatial sound to it that sounds just correct, even though it's coming from, your hands, essentially. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, if we just give up and treat our consoles as just physical launchers, and we settle on a universal style controller, we're gonna give up, the novelty of like what made the Wii special. What makes the DualSense
Yeah.
special.
You with its, proto Switch esque screen. Like, Was it a failure? Yeah, but it tried. It tried.
I think it was a failure more on,
Marketing, I feel.
and which is kind of, I'm a little worried about the Switch too. It wasn't different enough. And Wii U was sort of the Wii Pro,
Yeah,
and the Switch 2 is the Switch Pro. I
that was
would
my worry when the Switch 2 came out. I'm happy to see that it's selling well, but I was like, I hope they don't mess this up.
I feel like Nintendo, and I think I asked you this when we were talking the other day. They've got to do something different next time, right? Like we're not going to do a Switch 3
Yep,
and keep it simply a dockable portable. But what is that? I don't know. I mean, Nintendo has been fantastic over the entire history of their, video game history anyway, of just introducing new ways to play.
I still am so unsure of where we can potentially go from here. Like you and I were saying, they're basically just computers that you can some of them take around with you, and it's where do you even go? Everything just seems so sterile.
Yeah, it's hard to see, and so like I guess possibly bringing it back to the innovation that Microsoft's proposing is that it introduced some dynamics that we're just not able to conceive of yet. Maybe. I mean, I'm open to it. A little worried about it.
Yes. Yeah, I want to prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Well, all right. I have a fun chatting about this, and I feel like these kind of conversations have a way of stemming more conversation. So I'm hopeful that people will introduce some things that kind of we didn't talk about here, and that we can pick up on and maybe talk about in another, conversation.
Absolutely.
You're up to it.
I'm down.
So, I mean, if you're hearing this and you have some thoughts or you think we completely glossed over something, tell us about it. And this is meant to be a conversation. But before we jump, I do want to mention that you have your a podcast as well, and that is Living Without a Script.
Yes. Only a couple episodes in, hopefully getting some more done soon, but that one's more like a marriage relationship podcast that me and my husband started just mostly for us, but if people want to listen in and
Yeah.
get the tea on us, laugh at some of our misfortunes, relate to some of our misfortunes, and they're all there for
Yeah.
people.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm one of those people who like I watch some gaming content on YouTube, but I watch other stuff too.
Same.
But if they're after gaming content, I think what you're known best for is your Virtual Boy type content,
Yes.
and then also your gaming content in general. So that's Candy's from Classic Game Shrine, Candy's Classic Game Shrine.
Yep.
And I'll leave some links down below if you guys want to follow Candice. You can do so there. She does have a store where she sells some of her own nerdy crafts as well. And well, thank you. It was really nice chatting with you today.
No, appreciate you having me on.